Hammer, we were it's the university's new Sooner Magic Moments campaign.
What kind of magic moment is that?
Hammer, have you heard that the University of Oklahoma is now selling access to press conferences to fans for the low price of 692 games or $692, excuse me.
Okay,
does
that give them the right to ask a question or just be in?
It does not.
Okay, so I will tell you, the Kings on occasion will bring in groups of people to sit in, especially if there's like a major signing or something. So you always get the family, whoever's that person is, but on occasion, it feels like there's been a group of people who are, maybe fans, like in RIP Bill Walton. There's a time where Bill Walton came into the press conference, even though he just because Luke was the head coach and sat in the back and asked questions of his son. But it's not typical, and it would make things really awkward. It's kind of I would say the locker room is the player's personal space where we're sort of invited in and, have to follow a strict set of rules. We're not allowed to take a still photo in the locker room. Even if there's a jersey, you have to ask permission. And a lot of times they'll take it out in the hallway and let you take a picture and then bring it back. You're not allowed. So there are specific rules we have to follow in the locker room and stuff. That's their space. The media press conference room is really our space where they come in and sit at a table and we throw questions at them. I don't think that you should be able to sell access to that. And I don't understand why a lot of people would want access unless, when they're done, they get a handshake from the coach or the player and an autograph or something. Because if not, it's really not that engaging for us to just sit in the back of the room and watch something unfold like that.
I have another thing for you, if you'd like. Mm-hmm. You can pay $518 to run out of the tunnel at Oregon.
That actually makes a lot more sense than paying $692 to sit in a press conference where you can't do nothing. That look that James was talking about, that's the look that I get from him, Sean Cunningham, and others when I sit in to a press conference at the Kings. They're like, what are you doing here? It happens very few and far between. But, yeah, I'll sit in there.
Well, you don't have to go to the press conferences. You just go talk to Doug or Vivek or whoever you need to.
Not me.
You gave De'Aaron a pep talk one time.
That was pregame.
Oh, my bad.
It wasn't a prep talk.
He did. I mean, he became All-NBA a year later, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, the press conference room is very formal, right? It's there's a microphone, you raise your hand, you might get you're sort of in line to ask a question, and then the microphone moves around the room. And it's very specific. I just don't know that it would be that fun.
Sean's got to cut the clip of this of whatever the answer is. Matt George, Jake, this is local news here. This is the stuff that they've got to put together for their telecasts.
Yeah, it's our work. There's also you're looking for quotes and you're looking for someone to say something that just sparks your imagination. And then when they bring the next person out, you're going to follow that thread. And then if you go in the locker room, you're going to follow the same thread and just kind of keep, pulling on the thread, trying to unravel whatever it is that you're trying to figure out. And that's just kind of the game, what you're there for. It's not always about people always ask how do you, because I mean the first 12 years I only covered one team that didn't lose 50 games. Every team lost 50 games except for George Karl's 33 win season. Oh no, Dave Yeager's 39 win season. But so 10 years I had to write more than 50 losing game recaps. And that's not fun. And you're trying to come up with a new way to say that they lost. every single game. And that's where you have to sit there and listen for like the buzzwords or the why to what's happening. And then you're always looking for a way to tell a different story. So it's not just monotonous and, the Kings fell by a final of blah, blah, blah. So-and-so scored this many points and this many rebounds. But in the end, they fell short. You're always trying to come up with a different way to say that same exact thing, especially when you've got to write them, almost 70% of the time.
That's a crazy amount of money for that experience.
And it's literally the worst $700 you could spend. That is just awful. I mean, you split it with your buddy, it's $350. That's just awful.
Well, can you? Because that 700 gets you.
It's
you
two.
plus one.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. It's a +1 situation.
Yeah.
It's a plus. And I think the $700 game. I think there's the 700 is like the Michigan game. Mm-hmm. The other non-conference game, it was like 500 something. Either way, it's just like an absurd. It's an absurd ticket price. But Hammer, you were talking about these press conferences, and I don't know what Kings news there's to dive into unless it's to talk about Malik Monk and Russell Westbrook again. But how close are we today to what you do on a day-to-day basis? Not talking about the insiders in the radio show, but talking about the way you cover the Sacramento Kings. How close are we today to what we were prior to March of 2020?
Oh, you like pandemic wise?
Yeah.
Oh, it's way different. Yeah.
I was going to ask, it's not even close, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. So like leading up to that, so I'd covered the league for a decade when the pandemic hit, right? Like I don't want to say we had unlimited access because that's not correct. But okay, so I can take this a couple of different ways. Number one, there are a whole lot more people covering the team now than there ever has been before. Mm-hmm. And I think that's partially because the team is, started winning. But I also think it's because during the pandemic, newsrooms just like they were looking for content, and sports becomes one of the few things that, it's tough to have like a traffic beat where you're going out and covering like car accidents and stuff when roadways are like, at 30% capacity is to normal, and people aren't getting in car accidents at nearly as much anymore. And, the crime beat, they're like during the pandemic, the crime rates dropped, right? Because there aren't people out and about doing things. Sports became one of the few things where you had continuously going, even if it was like modified, where we're sitting up, in our regular seats, but spaced out 8 feet apart. And it's us and a bunch of cardboard cutouts. And if we're talking too loud, the players on the court can hear us. Right. So that's where it got to. But the deal is that there's so many, it was the only thing that was still going. Right. So all of a sudden, a bunch of the local television stations that had not spent money on sports for decades and had not supported the team on a daily basis, all of a sudden you start seeing them show up. And sort of the residual of that is now we'll have 3 or 4 news stations at every press conference, at most practices. I would go to a practice probably 15 times a year where it was me by myself at a practice, nobody else, me and Kings.com. And before I could, get back and write my story, they'd already posted the video of me asking, 8 questions to a player and them not asking any. And I'm standing there like, hey, you just stole all my content. And that doesn't seem cool. But now there's so many people there. There's so many cameras rolling. So I would say that's one thing. There's a huge amount of people compared to what it was before. But then as far as like where we're at in the building and stuff, we used to get the coach in post game, but it was real brief, and it was right after the game ended. The game would end, the coach would come in within like 4 minutes of the game ending. If you're on the road, it would be like right outside their locker room up against the wall. There's like 4 of us standing there peppering them with questions. And then we didn't get any players that way. We would just go right into the locker room. Now they bring out 2 players. And that in itself becomes its own problem, because by the time we get done with 2 players and then they bring in a coach, all the other players in the locker room have cleared out. So it used to be that we would be waiting outside the door maybe 10 minutes after the game ended. The door would open, we would go in, and all the players would still be sitting in there, hanging out in their uniforms, or, sometimes shirts off, sometimes wearing, a tank top or something that they wear underneath. And so when a scrum would go talk to somebody, if it's like DeMarcus Cousins, you could go around the room and start getting quotes for stories from all the other players, because they're all just sitting there. So you'd be like, hey, I just heard this really interesting thing in the coach's post game, or this happened tonight. Why don't you tell me about this? Or maybe there's a story you're working on for 2 weeks, but you want like 6 different players to represent and to give you quotes for a story on a specific player or specific event that's happening. All of that's gone. None of that exists anymore. There might be 1 player at a time in the locker room we get to talk to. We didn't see De'Aaron Fox in the locker room for, the last year, maybe 2, because if he didn't talk at the podium, he got the hell out of there before we got in there. So even if he had a 45-point night or something, if he didn't talk at the podium, he left. And so all of that's changed. Like our ability to write a really comprehensive full piece has changed.
Which one do you like better?
Oh, I miss the good old days. Yeah. I miss standing there after a practice and like saying, hey, I don't know whether it's Paul Westfall or Michael Malone, like, hey, I want to ask you something that I don't want all the other cameras capturing. But hey, with your microphone out, say, hey, I was wondering about this, and ask a one-on-one question. All of that's gone. Getting a player one-on-one is really tough. Somebody just walks up and starts recording the whole time, and then your interview is out on social media before you can even turn around. So I think it's killed the ability to write a good story. You can still get good content, but most of it's video at this point. And it really does limit what you're trying to do in the locker room and everywhere else.
Sorry about that, James. We were certainly some of the people.
You don't have to apologize. Rudy Gobert needs to apologize.
Rudy Gobert does need to apologize. And I mean, we could think of the good things this brought us. For years, we brought Zoom press conferences and all, media days and introductory stuff, all, live over the air. And I think that was a big part of the growth of this show. And it brought us Do-Rag De'Aaron.
It did.
It brought us Do-Rag De'Aaron, and we would know what type of mood De'Aaron Fox was in that day or that night by whether or not he had a do-rag on.
Yeah.
And then, James, you guys had a fun little game you would play while waiting for De'Aaron to emerge from his endless therapy or whatever he was doing before getting to you guys.
Yeah, we'd wait an hour to see if he was wearing the green do-rag or a blue do-rag or a black one or a checkerboard one, something with some sort of pattern. Yeah. We'd all take bets, not money. But then, we would all cheer as soon as he came out. And then he would laugh because he thought it was funny that we were betting on sort of what he was going to wear. So
we just knew
good times.
Actually, you know what? Like, and Steve B here in the chat, he asked a good question. Do you think that there's a lack of trust with now with the players and coaches due to social media? I'd even take that a different, expand. There's a lack of trust because they don't know us as well as they used to, and it's the same reason why I go in the locker room every pregame. We have a half-hour window from 6:45. I mean, from 5:45 to 6:15, where we can go in the locker room and we can interview anybody. I don't pull my camera out or my mic out unless I have something very specific, like a player's coming back and I want to put out a video really quick that he's in the locker room and here's what he had to say about returning to the court or whatever. I usually keep my phone down when I'm in pregame, and I try to be part of their culture. And that used to be something that was really cool because there would be, like 5 or 6 guys in there, and they would have conversations that you're normally not a part of and you can be part of, and you can sit there and talk about your life. They talk about your life. I know one time, like me and Costa Kufis were talking, and somehow our relationships with our significant others came up, and I said, I like maybe me and my wife have been in 2 disagreements like our whole entire relationship, but we've never like got into a knockdown drag out fight. Like that's just not who we are. And he's like, "Oh, I don't believe you." And then so I text my wife right there from the locker room. She didn't get back to me in time. I said, "How many times have we got into an argument in our entire relationship?" And then she fired back like during the game. She said, "I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 disagreements ever." So when I got back to the locker room, I showed Costa and we had a good laugh about it. But you got to know each other differently. Like, again, whether it's Omri, whether it was like I talked to Darren Collison a bunch, Jason Thompson, like just throughout the years, there are certain players that you just start to build rapport with in a different way because you're in the locker room all the time. It's why me and Scal still to this day have a great relationship because it's pre-pandemic. It's just really, really difficult for that now. And I'd also say that social media doesn't help. And the fact that I can say something on the insiders that gets clipped to, 8 seconds of me saying something incendiary about a player when it was really a 2-minute nuanced discussion about a player, that doesn't help either because a lot of the players see this stuff. And if they don't, their family sees it. And so you get into this weird thing where social media does have an impact on all this stuff.
Remember when you said the Kings had the greatest offense ever and it blew the 2016 Golden State Warriors away? ... Yes, indeed. Who was the player you felt like you knew the best? Like you had the best relationship with?
I don't know. Like I had a lot of conversations with Omri over the years. We still I'll message him back and forth. I don't know. I again, I had a really good relationship with DeMarcus Cousins. Like how many times did DeMarcus look at me and go, "Hey, come over here," and give me the come hither look, and I'd go over and we'd have a discussion, whether it was about NBA officials or whether it was about something I wrote. I know one time he said, "Why do you always write about my facial expressions?" And I said, "Because you're very emotive and your facial expressions tell a story." He goes, "Well, just because I look angry doesn't mean I'm actually angry." And I would say, "Okay, that's fine." I've said this before. He asked me once or twice, "Hey, why do you always write about all the technicals that I get?" And I said, "Because you got another technical." I said, "If you want to, we can make an agreement right here. You'll stop getting technicals. I'll stop writing about technicals. But until that happens, I've got to, if you're on your 14th technical, I have to write that one more technical and you're in danger of getting suspended for a game. I have to write that. You lead the league in technicals with 9 and it's still November. I have to write about that. But there's that accountability.
Is that a real number? Did he have 9 technical fouls
I'm sure that it was close one year.
Oh, yeah. Man.
Yeah.
At first I thought James exaggerating. Then I thought, well, God, what if he's not?
Well, maybe it was in a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't think there's at least one season where it was close. But see, those are the types of things that you have this relationship, this back and forth with players and with coaches that's just different. I can tell you, and this isn't to brag, this is just because my job, I have had phone conversations with almost every head coach ever from Sacramento. I think maybe Keith Smart and maybe George Karl, we didn't have a phone conversation. But outside of that, all of the other coaches for sure. And multiple times, there's when a coach is trying to say something, but he can't say it in a press conference, but they need to get something across to you that's happening that they might need help trying to express without running a player over with a bus. They'll give you a call and say, "Hey, look, I don't want to put all the business out there, but we have, I have to be sensitive to this, and this. And so I hope that you can be sensitive to this, and this, because that's what I'm dealing with." And it's okay. So you have a give and take with the team, with players, with coaches, where you're listening and you're part of their world, but they're also part of yours, and I think it's really interesting to look down and see your phone and there's a coach or a GM or somebody calling, and you're just like, oh, I've got to go take a call, and you're talking to somebody who super super high level with the Sacramento Kings, but at the same time it's like a business transaction. You're sitting there discussing stuff, and you're able to ask honest questions, because if they're going to be honest with you about something that they need to express off the record, you can ask more and you can sit there and dig. And that's why, like when I stopped being the insider at NBC, I don't feel like like I'm the insider at ESPN 1320. Like, I don't feel like I have to lose that moniker, because that's not on my letterhead. It's something that, like, I have conversations with people that other people, don't typically get to have conversations with. And it's something that, I hold a high regard for and I respect, but also something that, it's part of the job to be like part of their world in a different way than I think many people think we are.
You ever had conversations with Vivek or the Maloofs?
Yeah. I mean, I've had not so much with the Maloofs, like maybe like once or something. Like, I mean, that's what started the whole "Here We Stay" movement. Was Gavin Maloof decided during Kings Lakers pregame, at home, he decided to sit in the back of the media room, like one of those people you're talking about buying a seat. He sat in the back, and then he didn't get up from his seat fast enough, and the convergence plan was falling apart. And a couple of us ran over and like started talking to him, and that's when he started like not saying it, vocalizing it in the right way, but at least saying that that they have to keep their options open. When he said that, the way he said it, like, we all knew that they were going to try to relocate the team. And that's how the Here We Stay movement literally started in preseason in the 2010-11 season, when they tried to move the team later that year. And it was very specific. It was like Gavin sat in the room. As far as Vivek, like,
what a dummy.
That was just not bright.
What are you doing?
It's just not bright.
No.
Sorry, James.
No.
Go ahead. Jesus.
As Kenny said earlier, not the sharpest.
Not the sharpest tool.
It's not the sharpest tool in the shed, is how you say it. But yeah,
the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm mixing.
Yeah. You were just kind of like sitting back, like, oh, what's happening here? Like, why are you talking to us? Why are you saying this stuff? And no media relations staff around. No, and not. I'll give the media relations staff a break. That's PR staff. Like, it's different. The business side and there's the business side has a PR staff, and then there's media relations. The media relations staff is dealing with the coach and all that stuff, and going to get ready to go in the locker room, where a PR staff should have been there with Gavin, and he just started talking. It's like, oh boy. And I think one other time Joe Maloof started talking. But with Vivek is, especially the last couple of years, like, it's pretty hands off. Like, you can say hi to Vivek and stuff like that. I've had conversations with him. I've told you guys the conversation that John Santiago, when we were at Cowbell, we had with him and Mark Mastroff. We were standing at a summer league game, and him and Mastroff were standing behind us, and like we said hi. We were cordial to the two of them, and then we were watching the game, and then Vivek like tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Hey, what do you guys think of the Darren Collison signing?" And I kind of looked at John, and John looked back at me and goes, "I don't know why you didn't just sign Isaiah Thomas back. He's a better player." And Vivek was so taken aback, and he's like, "Oh, well, we don't think that Isaiah's a starter." And I said, "Well, he started for you all season, and the last 2 seasons has been really good." And so we went back and forth. He said something like, "Well, we didn't want to spend that much money on a bench player." And I said, "Okay, well, just so you know, you spent $8 million a year last year on Carl Landry, who is a bench player, and you only could have spent 7 and kept Isaiah." I said, "You also could have just kept them both. You could have signed Darren Collison and signed Isaiah Thomas." And then had the two compete and see who's better for the starting job. And so it was like this really weird like insight into his thinking and what the people around him were telling him. And so, but that was when he was very new as an owner. And, again, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to grow and stuff like that. But we don't get a lot of that anymore. But yeah, it's just a little different.
Poor guy just wanted a pat on the back, and Sam and John told him he's a screw up.
Sam, did you just call me Sam?
No, no, I'm sorry. James and John. You know what I was thinking was Sam. We traced back the last in-depth interview that Vivek gave was to Sam. I remember we texted Sam once about this, even though we're not supposed to be friends with him. Yeah. We texted him once, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't think anyone's talked to him since."
No, I mean, I wrote for ESPN a full-length article about.
And well, I guess we'll never know. We'll never know what that article was about.
Is that always funny?
It's funny every time. And we'll never know what the article is about because we have to take a break and come back. Steeler with Casey, Sacramento sports leader, ESPN 1320. Or James.
I'm back.
Yeah, there it is. We had to go to break. Yeah, I got to find that text right because we text Sam like, "Hey, is this the last interview that Vivek gave?" And I think the consensus belief was, yeah, that was it. He said, "Oh, that was a doozy of an interview."
The what?
Sam said, "Yeah, that was a doozy of an interview."
How long ago was that?
We got it. Let's see. We cannot find anything of substance since 2016.
2000 what?
16.
Oh, okay. So when he fired Malone, which is when I
would think 15. Because my first coach firing was
he took over.
Hiring was Dave, so that would have been
13,
George Karl,
14,
right?
14. So it was 14. It was 13, 14. He took over in 13. He fired Keith Smart. Well, they let Keith Smart go, hired Malone. Malone lasted a full year and then early the next season. So it was a back half of 2014. I sat in his lounge with him on a white couch, just the two of us, for like 15 minutes. And he gave me that entire random marching band. He wants a jazz band leader, not a Sousa marching band leader. And he wants it to be free flowing and all that stuff. And I wrote that for ESPN, like not for Cowbell. That went straight to ESPN. And actually, I never got paid back. I never got paid for that, shysters. But I don't want to talk about that. But yeah, I mean that was I don't know 2,000 plus words on the mothership, and again, I think after that they started to realize that it's not a good idea. Yeah, I might be entitled to compensation. Let me see. Vivek. See if I can. Oh yeah. Here you go, everybody. Yeah, drew down. If it was only worth enough for me to, yeah. Yes, one of those commercials. Stevie B, yes. Pete D'Alessandro did sabotage the Kings on the way out the door. That was a 2000. Oh, let me think. Shoot. 2015 NBA draft. Okay, so Malone got fired. That was 14-15. Yes, leading up to the 2015 NBA draft, if people remember at the end of that season, they had hired George Karl. It had already become a mess. Pete tried to save his job. Let me think. Maybe not. No. He did make it through the George Karl season, didn't he? Whatever draft, Pete D'Alessandro, from what I
Hang on,
know.
Hammer. You're coming back. Hang on, Hammer.
All right.
We'll just throw it right back to James. One, because he froze before the commercial break, which is hilarious to everyone except for James. Two, James is desperately trying to trace various levels of dysfunction that have occurred during his writing career while covering the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
Which can be an extremely difficult task when you start mentioning names like Pete D'Alessandro.
That's what I heard when he was telling that first story about Vegas. The Vic ain't talking here. He's not a starter. The Vic ain't saying that's something Pete told him.
Yeah. No, it was. And I'm trying to think, what year did Pete get let go when they hired George Karl, and then George Karl coached out a year with Vlade? Oh no, that is what happened. Okay. So after the Malone firing and then Tyrone Corbin debacle, which, again, Tyrone Corbin's a very nice guy, but the situation he was thrust into was a mess. And then they hired George Karl that same year. They brought in Vlade late in the year to be an advisor. And then during that offseason, it was very clear that they were going to go to Vlade, and Pete left because somebody asked in the chat during the break whether Pete sabotaged on the way out the door. From what I heard, Pete D'Alessandro took all of their draft prep with him. He took the iPads. They had like everything set up on iPads but again, that could just be a story. There were enough like indictable things for Pete D'Alessandro during his time.
Pete hacked the cloud. Deleted all the scouting reports.
Yeah. That was just a weird time. And again, that was a new owner who, was given somebody to hire. Somebody gave him a recommendation. He took that recommendation, and it ended up being like not the best thing ever. Yeah, and I know Pete gets a lot of the direct cannon fire for his tenure here, but it was more than just Pete. It was Pete. It was a new owner. It was, Chris Mullin. It was a lot of things that happened all at the same time, and Pete just happened to be the one out in front of it. And I'll say this, and I've told multiple people since this within the walls there, like when you hire a coach or you hire new media relations staff or whatever, like if you can't tell us something, just say I can't tell you, or like, hey, we're not going to discuss that right now, or hey, I'll get back to you when I can, that kind of stuff. What you can't do is lie. And there's nothing worse than, like, your job is to tell people like the honest truth as you know it, and to have somebody like telling you something that isn't true and that they know isn't true, and to take it a step further, they know that what they're saying isn't true, but they keep telling it to you. That's the most uncomfortable I've ever been with a general manager, where you literally just want to turn around and walk away from somebody like mid-sentence. It's just like, hey, look, man, if you're not going to be honest, it's one thing to like tell me you can't say something. It's a whole other thing to literally just lie to my face when you know that I know that you're lying. It's just so intellectually dishonest and shameful that when Pete left, the gloves came off. Like, actually, before Pete left, the gloves came off, and then Pete left. Me and so many others had enough of just the blatant misrepresentation of events that were happening.
He's got to be one of the worst things that ever happened to this organization.
Yes.
And that's saying a lot.
It was short, though. I mean, at least that he didn't get a 5-year window or anything else.
Yeah, it was incredibly damaging. He got rid of one good coach that they had, brought in one that just went to war with their best player from the start. I mean, it was that was awful. That was an awful, awful experience. I think it's the worst. I think it's
yeah, I mean, and Vlade, at least, again, there are certain things that he did wrong, but also he didn't leave the cupboards bare. Like he didn't sign bad contracts. He found at least one star. He missed on Luka for sure. I mean and he also, the 2017 draft, he missed when he had the 10th pick and he traded it for 15 and 20. He missed on 15 and 20 with Justin Jackson and Harry Giles, but the biggest thing is that he should have just drafted Bam Adebayo at number 10, or he could have drafted Donovan Mitchell at number 10, both of which would have been perfect fits next to De'Aaron Fox, and he would have had like long-term success. But there also isn't like a moment where Vlade puts you in just such a horrible situation. In fact, Vlade got the Kings up to the brink of being in disaster zone when he was going to sign DeMarcus Cousins to I think it was $219 million extension, and then backed out and traded him to New Orleans. That would have been the one where, potentially he, basically albatross the franchise, like buried them where they couldn't get out from underneath it with a massive contract extension that, that would have run well past DeMarcus's prime, unfortunately.
Well, let's get caught up to where we are today, Hammer. I don't think they have an albatross of a contract like that. Certainly not that one that runs long term. But suddenly, Malik Monk's contract has come into question as his place on this team. Your friend Mark Stein reported today that maybe the Sacramento Kings aren't looking to move Malik Monk right now. Are you in the camp, Hammer, that Malik still holds a lot of value to this team, to this roster?
Yeah, I personally think that Malik has a ton of value to the Kings specifically. Like maybe he doesn't have value on the open market like you would hope, but I've always been of the opinion that Malik Monk is a very, very good NBA player who doesn't just, he makes a difference when he steps on the court. We've talked about how, whether he's the most important player or whatever you want to call it. I just think that for some reason that's gotten lost. And part of that, to be honest with you, it's on Malik. Malik, sort of push and push and push to get in the starting lineup. And then that did not work. And so I think that that's part of it, that, Malik kind of put himself in a situation where, sort of maybe he got a little bit too big for what was happening and pushed the wrong way. And so, he becomes part of, the Mike Brown story. And that's just not really where you want to be. But at the same time, like, I still think that Malik is a super impactful player. The biggest thing I also believe that, guys like him around the league right now, they're just not getting the types of contracts that he has. And the types of contract that he has, it just isn't given to anybody at this point. You got your high end contracts, you got your low end contracts. Even the MLE, I don't know how many players actually got a mid level exception this year. And the answer, maybe one or two, if that. So it's just the dynamics of the league are changing so fast. And if you're somebody who's trying to reinvent a roster on the fly, you look at his contract and say, okay, I think I can probably get value for that contract and not take back nearly as much and actually go out and address a position of need. Now, whether that's been able to come to fruition or not, the answer is no, it hasn't. But I also think right now we're seeing sort of Scott Perry wind back a little bit of what's been said out there and say, hey, look, no, Malik is still part of what we're doing here. We love Malik. We want him to be part of the club. And that's because you're about to start a grueling 6 months where you're all in, team planes and hotels and like going out to dinner and everything. And you have to have some sort of kumbaya moment. And I'm hoping that they can move forward from this. But again, I don't know what his future is in Sacramento, whether it's like between now and February or whether it's between now and, next summer or the summer after that. Like there's no guarantees. It's the NBA.
James, in your opinion, how often do teams and players move on from these situations and be perfectly fine? We always talk about it where, how would you feel if they were trying to trade you and you wouldn't be all bought in? And I think that's very real. But there are times when everybody involved is like, it's part of the business. Like, I'm going to go out and do my job. I put a percentage on how many times you think summers like the Kings and Malik Monk summers happen, and then they come into the season and there's an understanding and it doesn't affect the way the player plays.
I think it depends on the player fully. And I'd also say, like, look, we've had this situation here in Sacramento for like the last 4 years. Like Harrison Barnes was almost getting traded every single, summer. He was almost getting traded every single deadline. And then it became Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes, or Kevin Huerter. Are they going to package Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes together to go get Brandon Ingram or Kyle Kuzma or whoever it might be? Like, I think the Kings have lived in this constant state of players looking over their shoulders for the last couple of years. And I don't think that that's a healthy environment. I do know that a lot of players compartmentalize really well. They keep things separate and they're able to look at the business side versus they go out and, put your best foot forward. But, I've told you guys in the past, like watching Marcus Thornton like fall apart in the 2-3 weeks leading up to every trade deadline was one of the most interesting things to watch. Just like a player who would be absolutely paralyzed by the process and like really, really struggling and frustrating and all that stuff. Like just to watch a player who's, averaging 20 points a game, starts scoring 2 or 3 points a game and can't hit a shot, you can just see his whole entire body language change. And then the day the trade deadline goes by, he scores 25 or 30 and, just like the weight being lifted off his shoulder. So it doesn't feel good to be shopped. And, I think that Malik is in, he's not in rare company in Sacramento. Like we're going to hear it all season, whether it's DeMar DeRozan, whether it's Zach LaVine, whether it's Keon Ellis, we have no idea. Look, once we get past December 15th, it could be Dennis Schroeder that we're talking about like this. Like, that's the game, and a lot of these players get it, but a lot of players, I mean, you think that they all get it, and then we go through last season where a player like, DeMar DeRozan in his 16th season says he's never had a coach get fired mid-season before. And like everyone in Sacramento is looking around like, who the hell is this guy? Like, what do you mean you've never seen a coach get fired? Like, I've seen, I don't know how many coaches get fired.
We've seen all of them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like mid-season firings. I mean, again, Westfall, Malone, followed by Ty. Dave Yeager made it to the end of his season, but he had one more year left on his contract.
Luke
Walton, Dave Yeager. Yeah, and then Luke got fired mid-season, and then Mike got fired mid-season. So I've seen 5 coaches get fired mid-season. So it's not like something new, but we all just assume that they all like in their heads, like, oh, this is a business. Like DeMar DeRozan's never been traded mid-season. Like we don't know what that looks like. He doesn't know what that looks like. He's seen teammates get traded, but it's different when it happens to you and you got to go live in a hotel for 3 months. Like it's really, really different. And so, like Jake LaRavia lived at the Sawyer Hotel all the way until he was no longer a Sacramento King or until the season ended and he left. Mm-hmm. Like that's what their life is like after a trade.
That did too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's what happens. They put you up in a really, really nice.
I believe Zach was there with a baby and a wife too, which probably.
I think they weren't around. That was also what made it difficult.
I think they were, and then they weren't.
Yeah, they live in Newport Beach. So he was flying down initially, and that's what when he was with the Bulls, he just said, "Hey, I've got to go," and they said, "Go ahead and go." But then when he was with the Kings, he had told us at one point, like I think 3 weeks in, like he hadn't seen the baby in 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's just really, really tough. Like during bonding time with your child, being away from your team, and like Zach's not unique to this situation. This happens all the time.
Yeah.
And where players they get traded, or even players they don't get traded, but they're on the road the entire month of February or something. Remember De'Aaron Fox, Rasay had their first baby like when the Kings are in the middle of their giant road trip, like leading up to the All-Star break, and then he basically got to come home and then had to go back out to the All-Star break and didn't want to be there. You're like, why are you acting this way? It's like, because he just had a baby and hasn't been able to see it. Hasn't been able to spend any time just settling in and being a human in their homes. And so, yeah, it's different. Like their lifestyle, you think it's all easy and stuff like that, but if they're not good at compartmentalizing, they're not going to succeed. They really do struggle.
If memory serves me correctly, someone responded to a tweet of ours saying, "We deserve to know where De'Aaron Fox is."
Oh,
and I believe Rasay caught wind of it, and that individual has never been seen or heard from again. Like that, like she ripped him to shreds.
Wait a man, who the hell are you?
Just have never seen him again. Just gone forever.
Well, that's like when people disappear like that, you just have to give them leeway. Like he's not the first one. Like I've said this, like George Hill, when he signed, George Hill had like 3 family members die in the first like month and a half of the season, and he kept having to leave to go to funerals and stuff. Like these, they're human beings that go through the natural progression of life, and it's really tough. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you were talking about Malik. That's how this conversation started. You were talking about Malik and how that trade stuff could like linger and be around, and it could happen with DeMar, it could happen with potentially Dennis Schroeder come December. Doesn't all of that make Doug's job that much more difficult? Like convincing a group of guys in October, hey guys, we got to do this together, or you were really at the end of September, hey guys, we got to do this, we got to stay together, we got to stick together, even though this all might look a little bit different in a couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of one of the most difficult parts of this job is getting players to buy in when realistically, like you as a coach might buy into them, but your franchise might not be bought in.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's always this weird give and take. It's like, we've all talked about, the words that Scott Perry said on a podcast about Zach LaVine. Like those words, and Scott will stand behind him, but those words live like in infamy. He's now one of your players. And so you're always left with this as a player and as a coach and as like a front office personnel. There are some front office people that won't walk down and get to know the players at all because they don't want that on their conscience when they trade them. They just don't want to know. They don't want to have that personal connection with somebody. And, so I think that there is like a really weird underbelly to this whole thing that people don't really grasp, that, like getting traded, or, how many people like become best friends, like being in a locker room. How bad, like right now, is Trey Lyles hurting, knowing that, he's not back with the Sacramento Kings. He doesn't have another NBA home. And, that's a place that you've been super clear that you loved, and that was your first NBA family, and now it's gone. And so like there is a harsh reality to the business side of this, and they all, have to live through it in their own way. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting season because we are going into an unknown, and we keep hearing 2027. Well, everybody whose contract expires before then is looking around like, well, I think that means I'm not part of the plan. And it's just, it's kind of awkward. It's a reality to like sort of what's being said, but under people's breath. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, just wait till 2027. It's like, I think he's talking about me. That's not okay. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely difficult. This is just a difficult situation to be in, but this is also, one of Doug Christie's strong suits and why he's in that position. People believe that he can handle it. People believe that he can navigate through that. And I think he can. I think one of the strong suits that he possesses, and James, you would know this as well as anybody, is the respect that he garners from the people that he comes across hopefully won't allow them to just mail it in. Because even if they're mad at the organization or the owner or something like that, there's a level of respect that they have when Doug Christie's looking you in the eye and asking you to do something that the majority of those people in that locker room kind of won't take that for granted, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there is a level of professionalism that you hope that players like play to, right? And the other thing is, I think while a lot of us out there, we write or we say stuff, and we write and we say what we mean, or we write and we say what we know to be true, and what are, like whether it's rumors or whether someone's on the trade block or whatever, like we have to be around those people. And like that's where like having these relationships actually matter, because like, hey, look, man, I'm sorry, like to De'Aaron, like we knew De'Aaron was getting traded before it was like public knowledge. We knew, like, and so like when we go on the radio and we start talking about it, that's a really awkward situation. I think the one thing that made it slightly better is I believe the team was on their long road trip, and so we didn't have that like interaction like right away, or it didn't have like I did not have De'Aaron pull me aside and say, "Hey, man, am I really getting traded?" Like I didn't have that interaction with him. But I'll tell you this: when I saw him when they came back to town with San Antonio, I went over, I greeted him, gave him, we hugged it out on the court, and I thanked him for being a pro his whole time here. He thanked me for always being super professional with him too, and we left on really good terms, and that's the way it should be. Like when we're doing our job and reporting what we know, it's not always easy. But as someone who literally reported the $219 million extension that DeMarcus Cousins was getting, got that covered through DeMarcus, through an agent, through an intermediary, through King's PR, through everybody, completely covered that it was happening. I even called the great Larry Kuhn, who did all of ESPN's salary cap stuff for years, and made sure I had the number right. There, I reported that it was 100% factual, and then it changed, and they traded him. And so that's what you've got to kind of flow with what's happening and understand that things do change. But as long as you're absolutely correct and you're not doing things that are nefarious or to get famous, then they're going to understand that you're just doing your job and that they're just doing their job.
I hope that's true.
Hey, there's a few of them that may hate me. It's fine. But
who could hate James?
Come on, man.
I don't know. Well, there's at least one guy out there that hates me. Let's be honest. But we can keep going.
It's okay. George Karl hates everybody.
Only that's who I was talking about. That's fine, though.
That's perfectly fine. Well, no one on this team hates you. We'll see what happens. We were looking at we were laying out the D'Lo and Casey schedule for September, which kicks into high gear in just about 2.5-3 weeks or so. And then as you scroll through the calendar, all of a sudden, there's Kings games right there, like media days, like right there on the calendar. There's preseason games right there. We're starting to look at opening day game. Like this is all happening very, very quickly. I mean, we've like Labor Day weekend this weekend. Yep. And then football starts Thursday. And then all of a sudden training camp will be here and all of this will be behind us, and we'll be talking about basketball that's taking place on the floor. And, of course, we'll be doing it with James Ham as we do every Monday and Wednesday And we'll bring the Fridays back at some point once the schedule gets going. But of course, you can hear James Monday through Friday on the Insiders beginning at 10 a.m., where we will be beginning tomorrow at 10 a.m. Make sure that you're here on Sacramento Sports Leader, ESPN 1320.
Vamos, James Ham.